What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we got a T.rex Top 10 Songs reaction brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter and patron of the channel, Evan David. Thank you, Evan David. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons that make this thing go. If you'd like to support us anyway, check out the Patreon link below or the patron link on the end screen. I'm going to tell you right up front, the music will not be in this video, but there's a Vimeo link below where you can follow along. All right, Evan David is famous for having these fantastic backgrounds on these artists. If you don't know a lot about T.rex, you're going to really feel like you know him after this. If you already know a lot about him, I promise you're going to learn something new. Evan David, very talented at putting these together. So these are going to be his facts. Let's get started. He says, rock and roll legend has it that the genesis of the group that would ultimately be known as T.rex began with the birth of its founder, guitarist and singer-songwriter poet Mark Bolan on September the 30th, 1947 in Hackney, East London. Originally known as Mark Feld before adopting the Mark Bolan pseudonym at the beginning of his professional music career in 1965, which, depending on the story you read, it was either given to him by his first record company, Decca Records, or he got it himself by way of either English actor James Bolan or Belgian jazz pianist Francie Bolan, although the most commonly used version simply has him adopting a contracted version of his then idol Bob Dylan. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the best version of the story, right? Prior to that point, Bolan had been brought up by a doting Jewish-English family, which had installed with both an almost unshakable sense of self-confidence bordering on egotism and a precocious, almost all-consuming desire for fame, which results with the often self-mythologizing Bolan himself later described as follows, quote, "I've always known I was different, right from the start, right from the moment I was born. When I was younger, I certainly thought I was a superior sort of thing. I was very much into my own little world in those days. As a little kid, I was always into music, very much. I used to look in the mirror and wiggle about. I was completely knocked out by my own image, by the idea of Mark Feld and what he would become. I remember seeing Eddie Cochran in the movie The Girl Can't Help It, the way he held his guitar and moved. It looked good, you know. Little Richard put his foot on the piano, and that was very outrageous. I think Elvis was the man because he really used to get down in that, which influenced me incredibly. That to me was the ultimate showman thing. I spent all my time then not going to school. I mean, I purposely did not go. For me, clothes were wisdom and knowledge. All I cared about was creating a sort of material vision of what I wanted to be. I was at the forefront of the mod movement. In those days, I created a world where I was king of my neighborhood. I was always a star, even if I was only a star of 3 streets in Hackney." After brief false starts as both a Dylan-influenced folk singer and as a member of the outrageous mod rock group John's Children, the next major turning point in Bolan's career came in July of '67 when he formed an experimental rock group of his own called Tyrannosaurus Rex. Unfortunately, this group's first electrical lineup would soon collapse after a few disastrous live appearances, but the ever-canny Bolan took care to retain both the band's evocative name and the services of its drummer, Steve Porter, who would soon change his own name to the J.R.R. Tolkien-inspired Steve Peregrine Took. In doing so, moreover, Took was following in the footsteps of Bolan himself, whose songwriting and later poetry would always possess strong Tolkien influences, an inspiration which, coupled with having seen seminal Indian musician Ravi Shankar in concert while still with John's Children, would soon lead him to transform Tyrannosaurus Rex into a two-man outfit with Bolan on acoustic and Took on bongo, drums, and other percussion. It was while performing in this newfound acoustic guise that Mark Bolan first met novice American producer Tony Visconti, who of course would later on become most famous for producing the great David Bowie, but whom at this point was looking for his first band to produce in his own right. As Visconti himself would put it several decades later, quote, "I opened up International Times. The first thing I saw was Tyrannosaurus Rex playing at the club Middle Earth," which I guess that fits with the Tolkien influence. "That evening, I went to see them. As I walked down the stairwell, I heard the sound of Tyrannosaurus Rex coming up towards me. It's a beautiful sound. It was rock psychedelic, but it was 2 people playing acoustic music. I walked in the room and I was amazed to see 200 kids sitting down cross-legged and listening to Bolan and Took, who were also sat down on this little platform, and they were singing and playing to the group. The audience was mesmerized. I'd never seen anything like this. About a week or 2 later, I asked Mark and Steve to come to my flat in Earl's Court, and I had one of the first stereo tape recorders that was for domestic use. I set up the mics, and Steve and Mark just sat on the floor in front of this little mic, and they played their entire set. I played those demos to my boss just to remind him how good they were, and we signed them shortly thereafter." Evan David says, "So began the first stage of a musical odyssey which would see the Bolan Took incarnation of Tyrannosaurus Rex release 3 albums on the Regal Zonophone record label between July of '68 and May of '69. Man, 3 records in freaking 10 months, man. People were prolific back then, right? As well as key early singles, including their first Deborah and 1 Inch Rock, both of which would trouble the lower reaches of the UK Top 40 on first release, with the former in particular drawing the band to the attention of legendary British DJ John Peel, whose early patronage would provide a crucial boost to the band's prospect. To quote David Hepworth, "For over a year, they were an appendage of John Peel, following him as he spun records in the lower common rooms of colleges and universities the length of the land, sitting cross-legged on their rug with their bongos and acoustic guitars, looking for all the world like people who were simply too fine and pure to be bothered by the prospect of worldly success. Later events would render that idea hilarious." In the case of Bowen himself, however, this is Evan David talking again, such an impression of hippie-esque optimism bordering on naivety would be belied or perhaps reinforced, depending on your perspective, by the abiding fact that, as Bowen biographer Leslie Ann Jones put it, even at this stage in his career, quote, "Mark had no interest in reflecting or reacting to the gloom consuming the planet. He was the antidote to it. His music was escapism. Bowen never wanted a revolution. He wasn't looking to change the world. He's never moved to write songs about politics. Instead, as the late 60s began to shape-shift into the early 70s, Bowen would instead find himself increasingly drawn backwards, or possibly forwards, to an ever-increasing use of electric instruments in his music." Bowen later explained, quote, "I've been playing the electric guitar for a while, and I was beginning to feel some sort of liquidness with my mental outlook in the guitar. I wasn't getting enough of it out of the acoustic guitar anymore, and it was a natural progression eventually just to have at it. A musical shift which would only be reinforced by the dismissal of Steve Peregrine took from the band in late '69 following growing tensions between the two over Took's increasingly anarchic behavior both on and off stage, as well as over the fact that Took allegedly wanted some of his own songs to appear on their albums. Took would soon be replaced by the band's percussionist and sideman Mickey Finn, who allegedly got the job not only due to his greater willingness to go along with Bowen's wishes, you got to obey the lead guy, right? But also in part due to his own highly photogenic good looks, which enhanced the band's visual appeal considerably, even if his musical skills were not quite on par with those of his predecessor. According to Bowen himself, he said, "The music had become much, much more rhythmic because Mickey is a very different percussionist. He plays tablas and sort of Indian drums. The rhythm section before was very loose. Now we're very, very tight. Musically, it's a much, much tighter rhythm." Evan David says, with his new partner in tow, Bowen completed one final album under the Tyrannosaurus Rex name before finally deciding to shorten it to the far more punchy T.rex, right? With the group's first self-titled album under their new name being released on the Fly record label in December of 1970 and reaching number 7 on the UK album charts. The album in turn would follow in the wake of the release of the band's first breakthrough single, the era-defining Ride a White Swan, 2 months earlier, which would in turn eventually reach number 2 on the UK Top 40 chart, with its follow-up Hot Love doing one better in March of '71. So they're really taking off now. By that point, too, T.Rex's lineup had been bolstered still further by the addition of bassist Steve Curry and drummer Bill Legend, and thus the stage had finally been set for Bowen's musical brainchild to fully emerge as the all-conquering pop phenomenon which would dominate the British musical scene, Godzilla style, for the next few years, scoring a further 9 consecutive UK top 10 singles between '71 and '73, including 3 more number ones, as well as a further 3 top 5 UK albums in the same time frame, including the seminal Electric Warrior and The Slider. Indeed, at their peak, this is a crazy stat right here, T.rex were at one time estimated to be selling a staggering 60,000 records a day, thus both achieving a level of chart success and fan hysteria, which had not been seen in Britain since the Fab Four themselves broke up. In the process, as David Hepworth puts it, quote, beginning to attract a different audience, one that was younger, more female, and not overly bothered about the music Bowen had made in the past. For a younger generation who felt like the 60s had never quite belonged to them, T.rex at number 1 felt like the harbinger of a new age. Bowen himself would later echo this point, saying, quote, we're playing for the kids who never saw the Beatles, never saw Hendrix. They're seeing us as those sort of people because they weren't around then. Evan David says more broadly, meanwhile, a myriad of other contemporary British artists, including Slade, Sweet Wizard, Gary Glitter, Elton John, and above all, Bowen's old mod rival David Bowie, swiftly followed Bowen's lead in embracing the enhanced visual possibilities offered by color television on programs such as The Great Top of the Pops by donning increasingly outrageous costumes, hairstyles, and often glitter-based makeup in order to entertain their audience, while also echoing a wider cultural desire to recapture the still exciting musical legacy of old-fashioned 50s rock and roll style music that would grow stronger and stronger during this time until it emerged as what would become known as glam rock. Again, Bowen and T.rex would prove to be enthusiastic pioneers on this front, and perhaps unsurprisingly, so given Bowen's own lifelong fascination, not only with the sharp, immaculate fashions of the 60s mod movement, but with such earlier flamboyantly dressed characters as infamous Regency era Dandy Beau Brummel, or Brummel, I don't know him. After all, as Bowen once put it, quote, 95% of my success is the way I look. Look and presence is what people pick up on. People are really works of art, and if you have a nice face, you may as well play about with it. 200 years ago, men covered themselves with something scented or were powdered wigs and faces. If someone is prudish enough not to realize it's all been done before, they're very stupid. The clothes I'm wearing now are what I wear normally. If I'm doing something like that and there's someone's dad watching, I want to get some sort of reaction from him. You know, whether he thinks I'm just a little queer or a chick or just someone freaked out. Certainly there's been change in England in 2 years, and we are part of that change. I mean, guys can now wear makeup. They can shout and scream. Elsewhere, meanwhile, Bowen himself would go on to describe this heady period of what the media swiftly dubbed t.rex as follows, quote, it's really exciting. I think kids for a long time have wanted to really boogie at concerts. There hasn't been a band for a long time that's actually gone out and done that. We started out as an underground band, supposedly, or a minority band, and we become like the biggest media band for like 5 years or something, which for me is really weird because many people used to say, you know, Mark, with your funny little voice, man, you're never going to sell any records. I always wanted to be a teenage idol. Every person wants to be. It's lovely to be worshipped and all that as long as it's real. I mean, what a gas. 80,000 people come to see you. And what a beautiful thing it is to show off in front of 8,000 people. Playing the right music at the right time. After 4 years of groundwork, getting it together to be at this point I do think we are good at what we do. We've been really the only visual band to come out of England that's made music for kids for 4 or 5 years. Evan David says perhaps the ultimate high point of the T.Rex phenomenon would come when the band played 2 sold-out concerts at London's Wembley Empire Pool Stadium in March of '72, whose fervent atmosphere will be captured for all time as part of the concert movie Born to Boogie, which is filmed by no less a figure than ex-Beatle Ringo Starr in a sort of symbolic changing of the musical guard, which by all accounts pleased the status-hungry Bowen to no end, even if he was later forced to admit that, quote, in fact, the film did not get good reviews. It was slated by everyone. They put it down for not being a masterpiece, but it was made for T.Rex fans, for no one else. That's what upset the critics. Nevertheless, T.Rex's rise to what another Beatle, ex-Beatle John Lennon used to call, quote, the toppermost of the poppermost had not been without cost, with John Peel, for one, becoming increasingly alienated by Bowen's shift in musical direction from his hippie days to the point that the pair became completely estranged from each other, a phenomenon which we repeated to a greater or lesser degree again and again in Bowen's life and career. For despite his undoubtedly charming personality, Mark Bowen nevertheless also possessed a sufficiently ruthless streak which enabled him to cast off both friends, acquaintances, and fellow musicians alike with equal aplomb once they were no longer of any use to him personally or professionally, with key figures such as Tony Visconti, Bill Legend, and even Mickey Finn parting company with Bowen during 1974, often citing the latter's increasing rudeness and ill treatment as justification. All this would be exasperated still further as Bowen took full advantage of the enhanced opportunities for excess in the shape of drugs and alcohol that his overwhelming success had afforded him, to the detriment of both his looks as well as his wider personality. As David Hepworth once again put it, quote, everyone who worked with him has memories of the charm wearing thin as success piled on success. He began drinking and drugging, which had an immediate effect on his looks, his key currency. Evan David says not only that, but Bowen would also begin to increasingly struggle to evolve musically in a way that would keep pace with the ever-shifting tastes of his fickle teenage audience. And while he would always vehemently deny critical accusations that the T.Rex formula had more or less gone stale in music terms, by mid-1974 it was undeniable that he was both seeing diminishing returns in terms of chart success at home, while also finding it ever impossible to achieve what had become an overriding ambition to finally crack the U.S. market after several futile years of trying. As Bowen himself would later put it, the pressure that was thus on his shoulders could be overwhelming, with the result that, quote, everyone is paranoid. Every number one you get, the next one that follows, you've got to top it, man, or you ain't hot. It never stops. The mania never effing stops, man. How many number one records do you get to be secure when there's no security? Evan David says, much as the case with fellow glam rocker Slade, which Evan David did a fantastic top 10 of, which you need to check out on after this, and I'll also put a link to that down below in the description. For example, many different explanations put forward as to why T.Rex never truly succeeded in the States during their active lifetime, ranging from transatlantic culture gaps, which meant that American audiences were simply not ready to embrace flamboyant musicians who wore women's clothes and seemed far too camp for their liking, to more prosaic issues such as the alleged repeated use of inadequate sound systems at T.rex concerts. As such, the years between 1974 and 1976 were comparatively lean ones for both T.rex and Mark Bowen himself, with even the stalwart Steve Curry choosing to leave the band during the latter year. As Bowen himself later put it, the thing about success, certainly in the rock and roll business, is that it gives an incredible amount, but what it takes away is irreplaceable. And sometimes I get a funny feeling inside me that I shan't be here very long. It frightens me sometimes. Musically, that period was really bad. I was way off beam. I got involved in drugs, particularly cocaine, and I started to drink a lot. I just didn't particularly want to be a rock star anymore. I had a feeling of being pinned against the wall by hundreds of invisible people. I totally retreated. For tax reasons, I was living in 3 countries at the same time: California, Monaco, as well as London. I wasn't really on top of what I was doing, and I wasn't happy with the overall direction. The whole strain in your head warps your mind. I'm still not sure of my sanity half the time. I was advised to give up drugs because I could have killed myself. That's been one of the problems of my life, to self-destruct. So I'm going to take a pause from Evan David's write-up for a second. So, it's interesting here. He talked first, a few paragraphs ago about the pressure. And once you start feeling that pressure, enough's never enough, right? You can never top number ones. That's as high as it gets, but they want more and more and more. So the only direction you got is to go down. Now, we talked about way earlier in this biography that all he wanted to do ever was be famous. But now, be careful what you wish for, right? Because he's reached that level of fame, and now he really doesn't want to be particularly all that famous. Evan David says, fortunately, however, the birth of Mark's only son, Roland Bowen, to his partner, ex-soul singer Gloria Jones in 1975, would ultimately provide him with the necessary incentive to turn his life around, largely giving up alcohol and thus losing a considerable amount of weight in the process, with the result that by the time Bowen agreed to present his own 6-part children's TV show, Mark, in summer 1977, he's able to reinvent himself once again to a new young audience as both an exciting live performer who had seemingly barely lost a step when performing with a new incarnation of T.rex, including ace bassist Herbie Flowers, and as sort of a proto-godfather figure to the growing punk movement of the time to boot, with many bands of this ilk being given their first TV exposure on Mark's show, which also saw his old friend and rival David Bowie appear on the final episode, with the two indulging in an impromptu jam as the final credits roll. I mean, much credit to Mark for cleaning up his life, right? All this coupled with the release of the 12th and final T.rex album, Dandy and the Underworld, Evan David said, which was by far his best album since the days of Electric Warrior and The Slider, as far as Evan David is concerned, meant that Mark Bowen's future prospects would ironically seem to have been brighter than they'd been for many years beforehand, when they were abruptly and tragically cut short by his untimely death at the far too young age of only 29. When a Mini in which he was a passenger crashed first into a steel fence post, then into a nearby tree in Barnes, southwest London, in the early hours of September 16, 1977, both killing him instantly and leaving Gloria, the driver of the car, alive but badly injured. For all the justified grief at his loss ever since, both personally and musically, however, it remains fair to say that the cultural influence of Mark Bowen and T.rex's music has been both wide-ranging and long-lasting, and they have been cited as influences by acts as diverse as Mott the Hoople, the New York Dolls, the Ramones, the Stooges, Kate Bush, Susie and the Banshees, Sparks, Joy Division, R.E.M., the Smiths, Joan Jett, Mark Allman, Boy George, Def Leppard, the Pixies, the Slits, Oasis, Nick Cave, Tricky, and of course, David Bowie, to name a few. That is quite the list, and have also been featured in soundtracks of countless movies and TV shows over the years ever since. As such, it seems fitting for me to close this write-up by citing Mark Bowen's own words once again, when he said in his usual charmingly self-mythologizing manner, "I guess my name will live longer than any record. I'm the cosmic dancer who dances his way out of the womb. I'm a lifestyle. I am my fantasy. Personally, the prospect of immortality does not excite me, but the prospect of being a materialistic idol for 4 years does. I like being loved. Isn't it nice that someone can love you enough to put your picture on their bedroom wall?" And I'll tell you, he died in 1977. I'm filming this in 2022. And I mean, here we are, and we're still talking about him 45 years later. Evan David said, "I've been a fan of Mark Bowen and T.rex ever since I bought a cassette compilation of theirs as a teen in the mid-90s. And while I'm once again exceedingly aware that the choices on my list won't please everybody, hopefully this mixture of some of the band's biggest hits with some of my own personal favorites will provide a fun and entertaining point for discussion. And as ever, I look forward to seeing other Mark Bowen fans' T.rex top 10s in the comments below." So that ends Evan David's fantastic write-up. I'll remind you again, the music won't be in here, and video. 7 of the 10 songs we're going to watch live performances on. They won't be in this video, but they're a Vimeo link below. Thank you again, Evan David, for all the hard work you put in on this. All right, guys, we're going to kick this top 10 list off with Hot Love, first released as a non-album single in February 1971, whereupon it swiftly became T.Rex's first UK #1, as mentioned above. This gleefully joyous and simple-sounding tune has been described by its producer, Tony Visconti, as being, quote, the bounciest, happiest song you can think of. The T.Rex band went to America to tour. After about 3 weeks, I get a long-distance call from my boss back in London saying, you better record more singles. This song is still #1. We are going to react to the historic video of the song performed live on Top of the Pops in March of '71, a performance which has been widely cited as truly kickstarting the glam rock movement in the UK due to Mark's usage of glitter makeup on his cheeks for the first time on TV. All right, Hot Love. I expected a little more, maybe flamboyant performance, but I guess showing up in the makeup is baby steps, right? Fine song. I mean, it's just rudimentary rhyming, really. There's not much to it, just saying his girl's this and that. The la 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 la, the bridge, the way it ended out, I could have done with far less of that. The song was like 4 minutes, 40 seconds. It could have been about 3 minutes. It would have been a lot better because that just seemed to go on way too long, but a good starter for us. Now let's go to #9. We have Ride a White Swan, first released as a non-album single in October of 1970, whereupon it eventually reached #2 on the UK singles charts. Evan David says this marvelously mystical tune not only provided Bowen with his first true chart breakthrough, but in hindsight can also be seen as both a lyrical and sonic bridge between the hippie and glam rock eras of the band, and as such is a prime example of David Hepworth's astute observation that while, quote, Bowen's head may have been full of Tolkien, his heart was in the 1950s, and he had a gift for retooling old riffs. This is going to be one of our Spotify tunes. Ride a White Swan. Mark's very good at creating, like, you know, the background stuff, the tambourine with almost like the hand clapping, and they're mimicking that to kind of make the riff infectious. The guitar was a highlight here. The lyrics pretty abstract, maybe some Tolkien influences here, but I read where Mark wasn't too worried about the lyrics on a lot of the songs, even though he ended up being, you know, doing some poetry and stuff like that. So I can see, you know, here a little infectious guitar riff makes this one work. Next up, we have Dandy in the Underworld, originally the title track of T.Rex's 12th and final studio album, released in March of 1977. Also released as a non-charting UK single 2 months later. This latter-day epic T.Rex tale of a lamenting Orpheus-type figure has been seen by many as being at least somewhat semi-autobiographical in nature, with Bowen biographer Mark Patris claiming that it shows Mark, quote, surveying the debris of his fractured career, only this time with lessons learned, he was on his way back up, not down. Regardless of all this, however, this tune itself provides ample proof that Mark had by this point regained much of his erstwhile power, both as a dramatic songwriter and performer, with the latter quality very much shown on this clip of being performed on ITV's children's show Get It Together in June of '77. All right, Dandy in the Underworld. First off, the video editing guy, man, he was really liking that, the fade in and fade out. All the screen graphics were, all the video editing graphics were at his disposal, and he was using it. Weird to me, and I know Mark had a kids TV show, weird to me to perform this for kids because there's not really that energy there. But Mark got more energy as it went on. He seemed to not have a ton of energy starting out because that would just be kind of awkward, especially with the content of the lyrics. I mean, we got Prince of Players, Pawn of None, Born with Steel Reins, On the Heart of the Sun, Gypsy Explorer, The New Jersey Knights, Exalted Companion of Cocaine Knights, because he's a dandy in the underworld. When will he come up for air, or will anybody ever care? And then saying all this other stuff. Now he forever stalks the ancient mansions of hell. And now his lovers have left him and his youth ill spent. He cries in the dungeons and tries to repent. But change is a monster, and changing his heart, so he'll freeze away his summers in his underground yard. And then it repeats verse 1, and then there's that Dandy in the Underworld, which is very catchy. So a good performance. Thought the energy ramped up as it went on, but a little difficult to perform that in front of those kids, so they did a good job with that. Next up, we have Cosmic Dancer, originally taken from T.Rex's sixth, and in the eyes of many fans and critics alike, their best studio album, Electric Warrior, released in September of 1971. Much like the previous tune, this powerful otherworldly ballad also charts the faithful progress of itself. Mythologized central figure as he emerges to trip the celestial light fantastic from womb to tomb in a way that's since come to eerily epitomize the life and legend of Mark himself in many ways. A process which is best captured by this performance, which we're going to watch from Wembley Empire Pool. T.rex concerts featured in an aforementioned Born to Boogie concert movie, the Ringo Starr one, as it amply demonstrates how well Mark was able to channel the passion generated by the T-Rextasy phenomenon into his own performance, even while briefly reverting to a more acoustic style, reminiscent of the earlier Tyrannosaurus Rex phase of his career. Cosmic Dancer. Once again, not a whole lot to these lyrics, right? But just a great performance. It reminded, it took us back to the story that Evan David shared that Tony Visconti was relaying about when he first saw them. He went into that club when they were sitting cross-legged, both Mark and Took, when he was still with the band, which is Mark and Took, in the Tyrannosaurus Rex days, and how they were just sitting cross-legged playing the music, and there were 200 kids sitting there playing the music. That's obviously what Mark was taking himself back to there. Very charismatic, very powerful. Great guitar player, which we're going to get into a little bit of that in a future song here on this countdown, but great guitar player, very good performance. My favorite song so far. Now we'll go to number 6, Ballrooms of Mars, originally taken from T.Rex's 7th studio album, The Slider, released in July of '72. This wistful cosmic rock ballad sees the singer adopt a decidedly more optimistic tone than in the 2 previous tunes, as he seeks to reassure his audience with typically cryptic yet benign futuristic sounding lyrics, while at the same time evoking other mythical heroic figures from the rock and roll past in this process, with the tune itself creating a suitably waltz-like atmosphere, as well as boasting a particularly searing guitar solo that strongly showcases Bolan's own considerable prowess as a rock and roll guitar hero in his own right, to boot. The latter is perhaps unsurprising, given that Tony Visconti once recalled how, a few years prior to this, Bolan had been studying Hendrix and Clapton. In fact, he went to visit Clapton one weekend. Mark came to me on Monday and said, "I sat at the feet of the master." He just apparently sat there on the floor and watched Clapton play. So his guitar playing was getting stronger and stronger as a result of all this study. He was really methodical. He just didn't pick up a guitar and pose with it. He really played guitar. So I knew it was on a future song. I guess that was a song. So yeah, Mark could really play that guitar. All right, Ballrooms of Mars. Once again, like with all the lyrics so far, they're pretty abstract. There's really nothing to break down lyrically, and that's okay. It's about the soundscape here. I thought Mark sounded fantastic on this. I thought the guitar work was great. A mention of Dylan and Lennon on here, a couple of his musical heroes. A little Alan Freed throw out in here as well. But, his voice, I think, was probably the best I have heard it. It just had that tone and quality to it that really brought you in. And like I said, the guitar work was great. Now we're to the top half of this list. Number 5, we have 20th Century Boy. Evan Davis says first release as a non-album single in March of '73, whereupon it immediately reached number 3 on the UK singles chart. Not only does this electrifyingly anthemic tune boast one of the most relentlessly powerful opening riffs you're ever likely to hear, but also a fascinating set of lyrics, albeit sometimes misheard ones. Bolan sings Robin Hood at the end of the first verse, not rock and roll as some people believe, which are apparently based upon quotes from notable celebrities of the time, but are also a prime example of what biographer Mark Patris dubbed Bolan's tendency towards using a, quote, nonstop barrage of weirdly constructed words, mainly put together not for reasons of good sense, but because they sounded good together. Main reason why I'm not breaking down these lyrics, right? Now, there's a ton of artists that have done this over the years. We're watching this from a German music program in March of 1973. All right, 20th Century Boy. I think one of the lessons to learn off this live performance: don't wear a boa, because the string kept going up in Mark's mouth. Mark definitely more charismatic and confident in this performance and a couple others. I don't know, confident, but just much more in your face a little bit. I thought it was a really good performance. I thought Mark looks horrible, right? You can definitely tell the drugs and alcohol are taking its toll. I think he looks horrible, man. It was actually striking to see that, but a really good performance, really good guitar performance there. The whole band was locked on. So I thought that was a really good job. Not much to break down in the lyrics on this one either, as I mentioned, the kind of the way it was put together. Now to the next track, number 4, Celebrate Summer. First released as a non-charting, non-album single in August of '77, just a month or so before Bolan's untimely death. This wonderfully upbeat and cheerful tune provides ample evidence that he was very much on his way back to his best at this point, which only makes such lyrics as Summer is Heaven in '77 acquire a retrospectively poignant and eerily ironic sheen all their own, even as it ensures that he at least went out on a musical high note, as it were. Bolan himself, meanwhile, commented that, quote, Celebrate Summer has a very definitive new way feel about it. If anyone thinks it's deliberate, they're quite right. I know a good thing when I hear it, and I'm young enough to enjoy adrenaline rush rock qualities. This is a performance from the first episode of that Mark TV show we talked about earlier in August of '77. All right, Celebrate Summer. Good performance there. I like the guitarist kept leaning his head and trying to photobomb the shot because they were just focusing on Mark as they should. It's a Mark show and he's the front man, but nice vocal performance there. Not much of the lyrics again. Once again, singing this stuff on a kid show is a little, but I mean, it's not a horrible song like lyrically or inappropriate, but hey, little girl, would you like a dance? Would you like a quick romance? Would you take a chance and celebrate summer with me? Hey, little chick, where did you learn that trick? Hey, don't you know you got rock and roll? So, I mean, a nice little message. There's really nothing to the lyrics. They're kind of like one verse that he just draws out. But it's good to see Mark later on towards the end there, looking much better and sounding quite nice. All right, now we're up to number 3. Probably a lot of people's number 1. Get It On, Bang a Gong. Almost everybody knows this song, even if they don't know that T.Rex did it. Originally taken from the Electric Warrior Once More and later released as a single in July of '71, whereupon it not only became T.Rex's second UK number 1, but also managed to reach a heady number 10 on the US Billboard Hot 100, becoming by far the band's most successful American single release in the process, and later be covered by groups such as Blondie, U2, and of course Power Station, which I mentioned early on, Robert Palmer and Power Station. This is a song I remember from maybe '84, don't hold me to that date, somewhere in there. Bowen apparently based this truly fantastic tune upon Chuck Berry's Little Queenie, hence the quote, "Well, meanwhile, I'm still thinking" at the very end, and it sadly proved to be the straw that finally broke his friendship with early supporter John Peel, who thoroughly disliked the song. Proof, Evan David says, proof if anywhere ever needed that even the greatest musical experts can sometimes get it wrong. In the meantime, we're going to watch this star-studded clip of the song being performed on Top of the Pops in December of '71, which interestingly features the alter ego of a certain Reginald Dwight on piano. EJ is going to be here, right? A role which had been filled in the studio by either Welsh keyboardist Blue Weaver and or Rick Wakeman of future Yes fame, with King Crimson's Ian MacDonald providing the saxophone. All right, Get It On, Bang a Gong. I was reading that, everybody knows this chorus, Get It On, Bang a Gong, thinks it's sexually suggestive, but it really wasn't. Mark said at the time, just saying all the different ways he loves this girl or is attracted to her. Well, you're built like a car, you've got a hubcap, diamond star halo. I thought this was a good lyric. It just fits musically. It's not really anything that makes a lot of sense. Where you're an untamed youth, that's the truth, with your cloak full of eagles, right? This is an example of how he just makes stuff go in there that sounds like good with the music. So just a great performance. So interesting, obviously, seeing Elton John over there, but I thought this kind of epitomized them at their peak power so far of what I have seen. All right, we got 2 songs left coming in at number 2, Metal Guru. Originally taken from the Slider Once More, later released as a single in May of '72, where it became their 4th and final UK number 1. Perhaps the best way to summarize the irresistible appeal of this absurdly joyful and truly iconic glam rock tune, which Bowen himself once dubbed, quote, a festival of life song. It's to quote ex-Smiths guitarist and lifelong T.Rex fan Johnny Marr, whose own fantastic tune Panic would itself be based in large part on Metal Guru. As follows, Johnny said, T.Rex were the first band I was a fan of, and Mark Bowen was my hero at the time. As a song, it's quite nonsensical, but that doesn't matter. A great record doesn't necessarily have to be a great song. He's exactly right. That's what we've been talking about here. Once you've been affected by any art in such a powerful way, it stays with you. So we're going to look again at the Top of the Pop, this time in late December of '72. Metal Guru, nice performance there, but this song definitely, more than any other so far, I mean, Mark was so influenced by 50s music, has that 50s sound to it, right? It just sounds really, really good. I really did enjoy that. And there's a girl in the crowd wearing a Slade t-shirt, so a girl after Evan David's own heart. T.Rex and Slade, come on, man. It doesn't get any better than that. Oh yeah, Metal Guru, could it be? You're going to bring my baby to me. Should be wild, a rock and roll child. So not a lot to the lyrics, but just a infectious little chorus there. All right, we're finally here. Number 1 on Evan David's top 10 T.Rex songs. You see it below. Teenage Dream, originally taken from T.Rex's 9th studio album, Zinc Alloy and the Hidden Riders of Tomorrow. What a name. Released in February '74 and released as a single in the same month, reaching number 13. This powerfully poignant and truly epic tune has long been regarded as containing perhaps Bowen's strongest set of lyrics, an opinion since echoed not only by Mark's partner Gloria Jones, but indeed by Mark himself, according to whom said, the idea of the song is whatever happened to the enthusiasm once felt at the age of 12. The song is about growing up. Evan David says, I, for one, heartily agree, and moreover, as Mark Patras once again puts the fact that the tune is, quote, so drenched in melodramatic resignation that it was less a lament than a worldly glimpse through the iron bars of an increasingly detached existence, gives it a sense of melancholy grandeur that for me is very hard to top. Hence, its lofty position in my list. Teenage Dream, yes, melancholic, yes, like hearkening back to yesteryear, just mention the different things, the curfew, whatever happened to the teenage dream, that's what we keep referring to, the Wizard of Oz, ruled my girl, but all was lost when her mouth turned green, Silver Surfer and the Ragged Kid, believe me, Pope Paul, my toes are clean, just all these different little random things thrown in here from being a kid. So I thought the guitar work on here was absolutely fantastic, as it was an obvious thing there. So really good way to end this list out. Before I get to my faves, Evan David has a ton of honorable mentions. He says probably more than he's ever had on a list. I'm just going to run them quick. Deborah, Once Upon the Seas of Abyssinia. Beltane Walk, 1 Inch Rock, Jewel, Mambo Sun, Planet Queen, Jeepster, Spaceball, Ricochet, Born to Boogie, Solid Gold, Easy Action, Venus Loon, The Groover, New York City, London Boys, Dreamy Lady, Crimson Moon, Calling All Destroyers, I Love to Boogie, Over the Flats, and especially By the Light of a Magical Moon, Laser Love, The Soul of My Suit, Children of the Revolution, Life's a Gas, King of the Rumbling Spires, and Telegram Sam. So if your favorite wasn't on the top 10 list, I would hope it was on the honorable mention list, but who knows, right? So now I'm going to get to my favorite songs. Honorable mention, I'm going to go Metal Guru, Celebrate Summer, and my faves are going to be Ballrooms of Mars, Cosmic Dancer, and of course, Get It On, Bang a Gong. It's got to be in there. So a really good list. Like I said, I didn't really know anything about T.rex. Now I feel like I understand Mark Bowen, see the different stages he went through. As it is with all of these, not all, but almost all these artists, especially in the late 60s and 70s, man, the drugs and alcohol, they were everywhere, man, and they got to almost all of them, man. But he was able to pull himself out of that before his life obviously tragically ended. But glad to see him get through that on the other side. Much kudos for him to do that for his son. And guys, let me know what you think of this thing, right? Tell me your favorite tracks below. Tell me what you think Evan David got right and wrong. He can take it. He invited you to do it at the start of this video. And until next time, guys, I will see you.